Now, I was having some conversations on Facebook with some people earlier this week, and it came to my attention that an awful lot of people don't realise just how vulnerable the UK is. We were talking about the possibility if we left the EU, which I hope we will, but we were talking about the possibility that various European nations might take sanctions against us because we've left. Now, people seem to think that this wouldn't be a very big deal, but not only are we an island, but since the Second World War our population has increased by approximately another 50%. Now, in the Second World War we were dependent on some imports, mainly from the States, but we did manage to pull our way through. If the same sort of situation was to occur now, if someone decided that they were going to blockade all of our imports or just plain not deal with us under various trade agreements, then we would have a big problem. And the problems we would have really come in two areas: energy and food. With food being the most important one, because people don't realise in this country, because of the pursuit of the profit, our supermarkets don't keep much food. This might sound a bit strange because you go to the supermarket, it's always full, there's always lorries going about. But let's think back, start of World War II, we produced most of our food. We didn't import that much. We imported obviously exotic fruit like bananas. We imported French cheeses, which not really essential unless you happen to be French. But the majority of our food was grown here. We could grow enough to support ourselves. Now we can't. And because there's been this pursuit of the profit margin, there are no warehouses in this country. Now, I know you think, oh yeah, I've seen this big place with Tesco written all over it, blah blah blah. That's not a warehouse. It's a distribution centre. What it does is it takes, say, a whole truckload of bread, and it'll split it out into orders for all the various different supermarkets. It doesn't actually store very much in the way of food. It kind of repackages it and distributes it. You'll find that the warehouse section of these warehouses are full of lovely edible goodies such as flat screen TVs and furniture and washing up bowls and things like this, consumer items which aren't really perishable. And there's a lot of good reasons for this. It's very, very expensive to temperature control a warehouse. It's very, very expensive to have a warehouse to start with. So all of the supermarkets have got rid of all the storage that they used to have. Now, that means that they rely on a thing called just-in-time delivery, and that is exactly what it says. Fruit, for example, might leave the continent, and 10 hours later it'll be a distribution centre, and another 10 hours after that it will be at your local supermarket. This is the way of things now. Unfortunately, what that means is this country has very low food stocks. I dug into it for a book I was writing a couple of years ago, and a few years ago we had a week's worth of food, and that kind of concerned me a bit, because you know, if someone was to turn around and clamp down on all imports, we've got a real problem, because we import something like 38% of our food, and most of what we import is essentials. Now, I thought a week was bad. I found articles online more recently that says that that week has gone down. We now have 2 days worth of food in the country. Now just think about that for a minute. there's 2 days worth of food in the country. What that means is if there's a slight hiccup with the supply, if for example there is a dollar collapse, which a lot of people say is going to happen, and that affects shipping companies. So shipping companies stop shipping things. Here in Britain we're going to starve. And in the Second World War we had a big merchant navy to try and help us out that would go out and get things. No, not anymore. Nearly all of our ships are owned by overseas corporations. They're registered in foreign ports, and if there's a problem they're going to come nowhere near the UK. So this is one massive problem. It's a huge area of vulnerability for food. And another thing is energy. Were you aware that we import a quarter currently of all of our electricity? We can't generate enough. Now the government was hoping that the green solutions, like for example wind power, which billions have been pumped into wind power, they were hoping that that would fill the gap. Unfortunately, wind power currently accounts for about 1% of our energy needs. 1%. Yet we've spent enough on it. Well, it's unbelievable. We could have had nuclear power stations instead of wind power, and had far more electricity. But never mind, we import nuclear power from France instead. They are our major supplier for electricity, and it is generated from nuclear power. So that's a huge problem. And it's not just the fact that, okay, France is an ancient enemy and we could very well have an argument with France because war in Europe is looking more and more likely with the Ukraine situation and so on. But it's the fact that it comes in underground, undersea cables, and the cables themselves are very vulnerable to attack. You can't guard, 80-mile long cable that goes undersea. You just can't guard every inch of it. Someone can just drop a mine over the side and sever it. Big problem there. Gas is the same. Now, we imported, at the last count, almost 50% of our gas. And it comes in pipelines, once again underneath the North Sea, from Norway, Denmark and Belgium. Now yes, we used to produce quite a lot of gas and oil. However, in 2013 the production of gas and oil by the UK contracted dramatically. And this was because the fields are running out. We've sucked everything out of it that's easy to get. So we have gone from being an oil exporting nation to being an oil importing nation. And not only do we import oil, we import gas. Something like 48% of our energy needs are imported. And that creates another vulnerability really, because if that was all to be chopped off, you're not just talking about a nationwide series of rolling blackouts. This city has power for so many hours a day, this city has power for other hours. You're talking about problems with water supply, because nearly all water in the UK is pumped. Not very much is gravity fed. You're also talking about problems with sewage. Likewise, a lot of sewage in the UK is pumped. The large main sewers are so deeply buried underground that really the only way to operate the system is with big pumps. These are all electric. So the UK is very vulnerable to outside interests, and the people who are responsible for rendering us to this vulnerable state are the government. Now, personally, I think the government should turn around to people and point out, especially with the worst thing, which is probably food, that they need to hold a month's supply of non-perishable items. Let's face it, the government aren't going to do it. They're not ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt used to keep huge grain storage facilities and store grain, which was their real only non-perishable food source, for times of need. Now, our government is not that far-sighted, unfortunately, and it does nothing. Absolutely nothing. So what they need to do is they need to come out with a list of foods that people should store, to give them maybe a month, maybe 3 months worth of food should the brown stuff hit the fan. Energy, there's nothing much we can do, not in the short term. Our only way out as an island is the same way that Japan took, which is nuclear. All of the green energy solutions which everyone thought showed so much promise have turned out to be, if you'll forgive me for the fun, just so much wind. Billions and billions have been spent for very little result. We need to go back, I'm afraid, to nuclear power, however unpopular it is. It's the only solution if you want to keep the lights on. Oil, we have to reduce our dependency on oil, and that, I'm afraid, means taking cars off the road. It means taking lorries off the road, and it means going back to more natural fertilisers, because don't forget, a lot of agriculture is oil dependent. It's not the tractors, it's the fertilisers which are made from oil. So those are really the only solutions, and something does have to be done, because the world is not getting any safer. In fact, there are a number of quite senior people who are going around saying that war again in Europe is quite likely. Nuclear war has already been threatened between Russia and the United States, and obviously if that happened we'd be plunged into it up to our necks, because we have agreements with America that we have to help them, as they helped us in the Second World War, which is fair enough, but it means that if anything does happen we're likely to get dragged into it. If that happens, then obviously Russia is going to turn off the gas supplies. Although we don't buy gas directly from Russia, guess what the countries we buy gas from do. So that means no gas to heat your flat in the winter. Likewise, there are just too many things to think about. Anyway, so this has been just a fairly short video on Britain's vulnerabilities, and I might do some videos later on with some scenarios that have been taken from various sources. They're not my own, as to what may happen in the event of problems with oil, in the event of problems with electricity, in the event of problems with the food supply. And some of them are interconnected, because if you've got a problem with oil, you're not going to be importing much food. If you've got a problem with electricity, you're not going to have a lot of water. It's just one of those things, I'm afraid. Anyway, see you again soon.